Agenda and call up the applicants, and after the applicant presents his or her request and the board has had time to ask questions and discuss the project, we will accept questions from the audience. Because this is a public meeting, it is required by law that you give your name and address before you speak. Although we may disagree on the issues raised, all persons present during this meeting are expected to be civil to all of the meeting attendees. This includes members of the commission, staff, abutters, concerned citizens, and property owners and project applicants. That being said, we'll get started. The first order of business will be roll call. I start to my far left.
Vanessa Karn.
Michael Spillane, present.
Peter Wilson.
Chelsea King.
Georgia Pendergast.
Okay, the first item on our agenda is member reappointments. At present, we have two members that are required to be reappointed, Chelsea King and Vanessa Curran. I think the first we'll start with will be Vanessa Curran. Is there any, first of all, Vanessa, you'd like to be reappointed?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, any discussion?
I make a motion that we forward a recommendation of reappointment to the Board of Selectmen.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next up is
You're on.
Chelsea King. Chelsea, you ready to continue?
Yes.
Again, make a motion that we forward a recommendation of reappointment for Chelsea King to the Board of Selectmen.
I'll
All in-
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Congratulations. Okay. Next up, we have three candidates that are interested in serving on the Conservation Commission. They are Joe O'Donnell, Ken Wally, and Ann McGill. Could I just ask you to stand up and introduce yourselves and maybe just give, a minute or two?
Do we want to go one
spiel
at a
of-
time?
Yeah.
We'll start with Ann.
So Ann?
And there's a microphone over here, if you don't mind. It's this teeny, skinny one. I know.
Okay, I don't mind.
Only because this is being
right.
broadcast.
Okay.
so.
Ann McGill, and I now live in Danvers 1 year longer than I lived in the Berkshires.
How long would that be?
34. And I am a adjunct professor of writing and research at University of Massachusetts Lowell. I also have a small consulting practice in human resources. My past experience is a human resource professional. My interest in this commission is very much personal in some respects. I've always been interested in conservation. And teaching research to students is also interesting because that whole generation is very much attuned to it. So when you're teaching research, you're always learning new things about the issues, and you're also prompting students to think about them. What kind of solutions could we have? So from that perspective, intellectually, it's an interesting aspect. Not to mention the fact that I've been a gardener for about ever, and I've just transplanted perennials to a section that was abandoned at the local library here. So hopefully they'll all come up next spring, and it'll be a place of beauty.
Well, thank you.
Good, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir?
My name is Ken Wally. I'm Ken Wally. I've lived in Danvers now for 10 years. I'm an avid boater, fisherman, and my interest is really in the ocean. I went to sea for a living for 9 years in the Merchant Marine before coming ashore and get married. And I'm really interested in protecting the oceans. I grew up on the ocean. I have a lot of experience with water, ocean problems, and I'd really like to see, better protection of this river. I go up and down this river all the time in my boat, and I have to tell you, I see some things that really aren't very good, and I'd like to be able to have some input into correcting some of those problems. And that's my interest in joining the commission.
Very good.
Good.
Thanks.
Okay?
Thank you. And
Joe?
is there another? He probably would know the river regs.
everybody. I'm Joe O'Donnell. 23 years old, lived in Danvers all my life. Graduated from Danvers High School about 5 years ago. I saw the notice in the newspaper for volunteers for the Conservation Commission. I'm interested. I've loved nature all my life, being in nature. And I'm kind of aware of the way the world's going with climate change and the world is deteriorating. I wanted to volunteer to make a difference. So I saw this opportunity, and I think this opportunity would allow me to have an impact. Maybe not the biggest impact, but it will be a decent sized impact. What I bring, I'd say I'm knowledgeable of the geography of Danvers, particularly conservation areas, the Ipswich River, Cho Farm, the bird sanctuary. So I'm familiar with geography, and I'm looking to help out and do whatever I can to support the conservation endeavors.
Good, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so you all know we have one open position as a commissioner, and we also would like 2 alternates. So as an alternate, you would sit at the table and you can ask questions. You cannot make a motion or cast a vote, but if there's a member absent, then one of the alternates will be a member for that evening. You're more than welcome to sit through our meeting tonight and just see how it all goes, or whatever, and we're going to discuss where we want people for our next meeting. Is that right? Yes. Okay.
Would the alternate only sit in to make a quorum, or at any time a member was not there?
The alternate can sit in every meeting, just like Neil had in the past, so whether they are,
For purpose of voting,
to satisfy a quorum, yes, we would call on the alternate, but
just to satisfy the
No,
quorum.
the quorum would to get it up to the 5 members.
But they could
Quorum's
sit
only
in.
3.
No, the quorum's 3, yeah.
Do you want to speak to that?
The board's 5.
David's going to speak to that.
Hello.
Yep.
Hey, everybody. David Fields, staff.
Hi, David.
Hello. They could sit in for the purposes of quorum, but if there is a member absent and you would like them to sit in and vote, they would have that ability to do so, I think like you've done in the past. But
Right.
Okay.
They would have the ability to vote?
I believe so. We can definitely double check for you before we go
That's how
forward.
we did it with Neil.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, good.
Well, that would assume at least that they were participating in an ongoing project, being
Yeah.
abreast of the meetings,
Yes.
the discussions. Yeah.
In the hearings.
And they were always welcome to ask questions,
Yeah.
even if they didn't vote on it.
So,
All right, first order of business, are we all set on this? Any questions before we move on? Okay, just listen in. All right, first order of business is request for certificate of compliance for Bridle Spur Road, DEP file number 14-1015. Georgia, could you just give us a brief narrative of where we are on this, and then
Of
hopefully we
course.
can... Oh,
I can do
I'm
it.
sorry.
Want me to do it?
Yes, go ahead.
Good evening. For the record, John Moran from the Moran Cameron Group. We're here tonight representing Bridle Spur Extension LLC for a request for a certificate of compliance for DEP file number 141015, which was Bridle Road Extension. This order was issued back in November of 2004, and it appears no work was done under that order. We were not the original engineers on that project. I don't know if it was appealed. There was no superseding order for that file number. However, approximately 2-3 years later, a new file number, 141031, was issued for Bridle Spur Extension.
yeah.
That was actually appealed. DEP issued a superseding order. The subdivision roadway and the drainage and all the infrastructure was constructed in accordance with that file number. A certificate of compliance was requested for that file number and was issued by the DEP and your local conservation commission. So file number 1015, no work was ever done under that file number, and the permit is expired. Obviously, it was issued back in '04. So we're just requesting a COC to close it out. The permit was never closed out. So it just kind of came up, one of the lots was being sold, and one of the attorneys was doing his job, and he found that there was an outstanding order that just, nothing was ever done. So again, no work was done under the order. The order's expired, and we're just requesting a certificate of compliance.
Fine. I note in the staff comments it recommended issue one for invalid order, but the order was never invalid. It just expired by its terms, right?
Exactly, so the invalid, that language right there, it's specifically stated in the certificate of compliance form. It has complete certification, partial, and then invalid, and that language basically says this issue is ordered, the work under it never commenced, and the issue expired. So anything that needs to be done on that order needs to go through a new one. So it's really just a new check on the form.
Yeah.
Anything else, Mike?
No.
Vanessa?
It's strange that it's called a certificate of compliance if no work was
So,
done.
yeah.
Well, like she
And
said,
that's
the
where that
right box
invalid-
gets
Yeah,
checked.
Yeah.
So it's complying
We're
with
just
an
completing.
invalid
With nothingness.
order.
Yes.
By no work being done. Which is done.
All set, Vanessa?
Yep.
Okay, Chelsea?
Yeah, no thought.
Okay, I have nothing else. I'd make a motion.
Yeah, I'll make
issue
a
it.
motion that we issue a certificate of compliance for DEP file number 14-1015 for reasons that there was no work has been done under that order, and the order is invalid and has expired.
And just mention the address, please.
And the address is 7 Bridle
Yeah,
Spur
that's-
Just Bridle Spur Road.
Road, yeah, although it says Realty Trust for applicant. The applicant is 7 Bridle Spur Realty Trust, correct? All right.
Motion's been made. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, John.
Okay, next up is a request for certificate of compliance for 16 Dartmouth Street, DEP file number 14-1316. Who's here to represent the applicant?
Bill Manuel, Wetlands and Land Management, right here in Danvers. 16 Dartmouth Street. Al Carnes is the builder, he's in the back row there, he's done a wonderful job here, and the work is done in substantial compliance with the order. I submitted a request for certificate of compliance. I noted just a few deviations. One is, this is what the approved plan showed. It was a rebuild, a refurbishment of an existing home, so the house and the addition are exactly where they're supposed to be. Remember, this got captured in your jurisdiction because there was the brook that is actually one lot removed, so there's a house between the brook and this particular property. Deviations are that this pervious walkway was installed, it was not shown on the plan. The approved plan showed a landing and a patio off the landing. This shows a landing with a patio around the landing. All of that's pervious because there are basically pieces of bluestone separated by about half-inch joints, and there's pea stone swept in the joints. There's about a foot or so of pea stone underneath that, so everything that falls on that walkway or that patio will percolate in. The approved plan here showed a line of native evergreen shrubs across the back of the property in that location. Remember that we were going to sort of clean this area up and then let it revert to natural growth. The area has been cleaned up. Remember, there was a big brush pile and there was trash on the neighbor's yard, and we've cleaned all of that up, taken all the brush out, taken all the trash out, including the trash on the neighbor's property. It looks wonderful. Instead of a row of evergreens, there is a fence, and there is several evergreen shrubs right in this area here. This existing shed was relocated back here just to have a more open area in the backyard, so the shed was always there, just relocated. It more or less serves the purpose of the line of shrubs that demarcate the area that was supposed to allow to go natural. So those were the deviations. I've gone through, as your order requires, a more or less condition by condition discussion on how it's compliant. Everything is stable. Georgia and I took a walk out there last Friday, and I think you can concur with that.
Yes.
We'd like to get a certificate of compliance and close this out.
if I remember correctly, the evergreen shrubs were meant to kind of do a one-to-one replacement for some saplings that have been cut down. Were you able to verify that it was kind of equal? Like what it was replacing?
It's way over.
More shrubs than were cut down.
Awesome.
And why did you substitute rhododendrons?
Well, there were some rhododendrons that were salvaged out of the front, but they're good, they're native, they're evergreen. That's what the plan said, evergreen shrubs.
Okay, good.
Why didn't you do what you were ordered to do under the order of conditions? You know, with the shrubs along the delineation?
You know, it's an artistic call, if you will. What we were trying to do was create a demarcation along this line here to separate the usable backyard area from
Right.
the area that was allowed to grow natural. So now what we have is vegetation here that comes around the corner. We have vegetation here, and we have the shed right in the
Can you see a
middle.
picture? Yeah. And you have the fence as the demarcation now, or is
Yeah, it helps, yep. So
the
the shrubs
fence?
right in the middle, right in front of the fence.
Yeah,
This is the before picture, Mike, so it's
yeah,
a drastic
yeah.
improvement.
Oh, yeah, all right. Well,
So the area behind the shed that is supposed to be allowed to go natural, when was that planted? Or seeded, or whatever you want to say?
Like last summer, did you say?
Okay. Because,
yeah.
do you have a picture of behind the shed?
Well, let's
that's
ask,
it.
what is
'Cause it
behind the
doesn't-
shed?
So it's supposed to be an area that's supposed
Yeah,
to,
what is that, Bill?
Is that afterwards? Is that from
That's
Friday?
after.
Yeah, that's grass.
so is this area getting mowed?
I think it's just short, right?
It was mowed once after initial, now it's just been left.
So what's going to happen with it going forward?
Vanessa, this was the before, if that's.
Yeah, we know that.
The intention is to allow it to naturalize.
Just grow out?
Out behind the fence.
Right.
Well, that would be good.
Behind the, like, not the, just those two short portions of fence in the shed, right, behind that area? Is that what we're,
Behind, in the triangle,
Yeah.
triangular area, right, Bill?
This area.
okay,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, I just, looking at this picture, it looked really short, so that's why I was asking the question.
It's kind of
'cause-
new growth.
Yeah,
I think that picture was taken just the last couple of days.
It was.
You looking for waivers?
I
No,
don't think they need any.
no.
Well,
I'd say it's
okay.
in substantial
because
compliance.
well, it said the replication shall take place prior to the issuance of a certificate of compliance. So we're saying pretty much what you did is the substantially equivalent to what we wanted.
Yes, I would
Right.
say that.
All right.
And we've installed more shrubs than were required.
You know, you did bring up a good point, Mike. There was somewhere in there, and I can't find it right now, we were going to give them 2 years for things to grow in, right?
That was it was a condition, but
Yep.
everything seemed to be healthy after a year. And, you know, we'd like to get the house on the market. They would like to get the house on the market with a clean title, so.
Okay, no, okay, I mean, I'm satisfied. I think you guys have done a good job over there.
Val, thank you.
Does anyone else have any further questions?
well, thing with the extra growing season is we might see a difference, because this is supposed to be an area that's supposed to be naturalized, and it's definitely not there yet. It certainly probably would be in another year, so I don't know if we, I mean, what can we say anything about it not getting mowed going forward? Is there anything that we can do with that?
You can add it as a condition.
Make it a condition on your motion.
Well, if we ought to forgive them the certificate of compliance, we're
No,
closing.
that's true, we're closing it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
that's
what
what
is the
it's there
existing
for.
order of condition on that? That it's remain natural, right?
That's,
Yes.
it was to be naturalized, yes.
And that's what the plan says, or the NOI and the order indicate that that area
Is it show, this is what you would call the as-built then?
Right.
So I think
So is
this,
it shown on the plan?
it was shown on the original
Yeah,
plan.
the
This is
original
the-
approved plan says top dress with loam and seed with perennial grass mix allowed to restore naturally.
Okay, but that's not on the as-built.
No?
The as-built controls
Would you
now.
like that
Well,
annotated on
Yeah,
there?
yeah.
Sure.
Yes,
Is that all right, Steph?
Yeah.
Okay,
I can't imagine why that
all right. Well,
I'm satisfied.
you're satisfied?
Yes.
Chelsea?
I'm all set.
Good. Anyone in the audience have any questions, comments?
And I wouldn't make that a condition, I'll just take your word that you'll do it.
Yeah,
You're
we'll-
here all the time.
We'll
so-
submit that revised plan
Yeah.
before you issue the certificate.
Yes.
All right, fine. All right, in that case, I'll make a motion that we issue a certificate of compliance for DEP file number 14-1316, 16 Dartmouth Street.
Motion's been made. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Yeah,
Thank you.
good luck, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, next up, a continuing public hearing on 48 Riverside
We'll get it on
Street,
plan, right?
DEP file number 14-1337. Who's here to represent the applicant?
Mr. Cobb.
Good evening, Alex Carp, 144 Elm Street, Amesbury, for the applicant of the proposed project, pile-supported pier, gangway and float system. Since we last met, we had a site visit, and you folks requested some additional information. And done my very best to address those as comprehensively as I could.
Yeah.
And my best to address any
Right
concerns you
here,
have
there it is.
tonight.
Okay.
You all set, Alex? Questions? Mike?
Well, I like the way he pointed out each comment and then did a response, but actually, in every response, he explained why he couldn't satisfy the comment. So maybe we ought to talk about that. The first one had to do with the clearance on the float. Now, specifically, the float we're talking about, Mr. Kopp, will you point that out? At the very end,
Yes.
all right, where the boat would attach.
Yes.
All right, and there's nothing beyond that, correct? There'd be nothing beyond that?
Towards the river? No.
No, towards the river. No.
Just the anchor blocks, but
Yeah,
they'll,
so,
What's the square footage of the float?
The surface area of the float, it's 6 by 20, so it's 120 square feet.
yeah. And the recommendation was 30 inches. Historically, we've been using 18, and the thought was that we want to move the needle on that and create something more in line with the 30-inch recommendation, and why shouldn't we do that?
So respectfully, that jeopardizes the intent of the project.
You still get the project done.
Right, but the value of being able to access the water safely is diminished.
Was it about stepping up on the extra 12 inches or something?
Yes.
Like a 12-inch step? So-
Yes, there are other considerations, though,
But I mean,
about environmental
a stair,
impact.
how high is a stair if I go from one stair to another? Not 12, but maybe 6 or 7. What about something in between?
Do you have a suggestion?
Yeah, I do. Well, I don't know about the rest of the board.
Go ahead, Mike,
I
it's your
was
turn.
thinking-
We'll go one by one. So just
All right.
say your piece.
I was thinking 18.
We're providing 18.
Well, I'm sorry, I said 8. You have 18, I was thinking 24, midway between the 18 and the 30.
I'm gonna have to discuss that with the applicant. It is,
He's right there.
He answered those questions.
How
it
you
is
doing?
problematic. We really feel we made a significant effort to improve on the situation.
Well, I'm throwing that out. I
minimize-
mean, there's other
and
members
minimize
here, too.
adverse effect.
Yeah.
Excuse me?
There's other members here, but it was a recommendation.
Recommendation by Department of Marine Fisheries?
Yes.
Yeah, so that is not a regulation. That's a recommendation that they provide, and it's not site-specific. They did a site-specific review, but that information they provided to you doesn't have the level of detail and consideration for the impacts to the area.
Well, I mean, you said you need to discuss it with your client, but I'm just one person on the board. I don't know how the others feel about it.
Well, I guess I have a question about, you said it would make it difficult to use, because it would be different to try to get on top of a float that's 18 inches above the mud versus 30 inches above. But if would you even be using it when it was bottomed out anyways? Because you'd be in mud, you wouldn't even be in water.
So we've minimized the length of the pier to get that float just over mean low water. The idea being that we would have a minimum amount of water theoretically at most low tides.
At all times?
To service the kayak.
And how much water is that?
It's going to vary, but
On average,
a few
or
inches,
a few inches? Okay.
which I hate to point it out, but relative to some of the other conditions out there, it's a significantly smaller impact to the mudflat. We're constrained by the extent of the mudflats out there, so the other option that we considered was extending the pier by another 100 feet to reach that depth of water. But that was rejected out of consideration for the increased impact. We feel that this is the best shot at minimizing the impact and still suiting the applicant's needs.
All set, Vanessa?
On that one, yeah.
I have one question on do we agree that there would be no pilings in the salt marsh?
No.
You're talking about the expanse of the pylons
Yeah.
that make them, that was another,
That was comment
what comment was that?
number,
We should take them in order.
Yeah. That's number 5 and 6 have to do with the salt marsh, so it is, they're the last ones.
Oh, okay. Well, that was yours? Go ahead.
Well, do you want to go through them in order? You had
Oh, I
suggested
think it
that.
makes sense,
Okay,
but,
that's fine.
Well, go ahead, Mike, you started, so I'm
all
going to
right,
give
all
you
right.
the floor.
So, DCC comment number 2 was to provide additional information regarding potential impacts to eelgrass caused by the project. And I think you're saying that, well, there appeared to be a general agreement that the conditions to grow eelgrass are very complex and poorly understood. Does that mean there is no eelgrass there?
Correct,
None?
yes.
Right, he had it, showed us a picture at the
Yeah,
end
yeah.
of the water.
And we went out there. Why isn't there any eelgrass there?
I
you
don't
know?
think he can
How much
possibly
how much
answer that
time do you have?
question.
Well, I was starting to look that up after you mentioned that, and there's projects going on to try to bring the eelgrass back, because it was prolific at one time, and it serves a purpose. It provides a habitat.
It is very important, and my response is that we've done a search, an exhaustive search, looking for historic documentation of the presence of eelgrass in that location, and the closest we got was about 1.8 miles, straight line, to Beverly Harbor. that's historic. So the more recent survey, which is the recommended resource from Mass Department of Marine Fisheries, puts it over 2 miles away, Beverly Harbor.
So there's no eelgrass in the Danvers on any of our rivers? But there is in Beverly and in the Salem Sound, I think there's some, right?
It's a very complex issue.
I was actually pretty satisfied with the answer to this. I felt like
Yeah.
it kind of resolved it pretty well.
You like the answer? We'll
Yeah,
move on?
there
Yeah?
isn't overalls there.
All right. Well, comment 3 was this has to do with the anchor options, and you outlined the various types. I had mentioned helix, and I see you put it in there because I believe that's what we used in the swamp walk for the,
Yeah, I remember that.
yeah. I did look up that. It's strong, it's easy to install, it's easy to remove as well, right? It has,
I think that's a matter of opinion. My experience is it's difficult to find a qualified contractor. You are dependent on ground conditions suitable for that anchor.
well, it's used in
But
these, it's
provided
used
all-
in these applications.
Provided all those conditions can be met, yes, it's a suitable alternative.
So, assuming it could be done, you wouldn't be opposed to that?
Correct.
You would just come back and you would tell staff, we tried, we can't do it for whatever reason, if that were the case?
That's amenable, yeah.
So,
We would like you to consider the information, though, that,
I read all this.
okay.
I will note,
And the deadweight anchors, they can move, though. They can move, and when they move, they disrupt the bottom.
Correct, and a helix anchor can fail.
Well,
It's-
but they
you
don't move
design-
generally.
Yes, but you design for a probability of failure.
Okay, George just wanted to make a point on that.
yeah, I did just want to confirm, I spoke with Chris Sanborn, the harbor master, and he did confirm with your statement that finding the anchors and finding contractors to install them has been extremely difficult for the harbor master just in general, so.
We did
that
cover this
sounds
ground
like-
last summer for sampling too, but it's a little stale now.
Well, it's been a year, so I mean,
Yeah.
there's contractors out there, they sell the things, why they have to install what they sell. And somebody has to. I don't know, I'd like to see it as a condition if it's feasible. I don't know. The rest, I would like to hear from the rest of the,
You want them to try it, and if
Yeah,
it fails,
they
they
want
want
to-
to switch to... I'm concerned about
What?
doing too much disturbance, to be honest, if we're gonna be trying something.
well, I don't mean, I mean to explore the feasibility of it.
Okay, not actually like put some
Not to
in.
try and see how it works and
Okay.
then come back.
I'm not sure I understand. Can you clarify?
Well, you're gonna have someone's gonna come out and either say, well, this, we can do it or we can't do it, right?
They're not going to be able to say that without disturbing the area until they try. Or you're talking about borings, which
Okay.
is not part of this project.
Well, I feel strongly about it.
Okay. We can include, if it's acceptable, we can include that as a condition. We're fine with that.
So-
To just explore the feasibility?
No.
Or that use it,
No,
I think
no.
he's,
We will attempt to use it.
You attempt to use it, all right. You don't know till you try, right?
What you want.
And then, well, then we'll know in the future. I mean,
Well, just take that a step further. How are you, if we issue an order of conditions, and they're gonna go out and try and get a contractor to do this, and if he doesn't, then he has to come back to us and say, oh, we're gonna use the deadwood anchors?
yeah, or
they're-
something
they're
else,
unable
another
to install it
alternative.
properly,
Yeah. He's
then-
got 1, 2, 3, 4 different alternatives here. The mushroom didn't seem. Want to move on to 4?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'd like to.
Consider using alternative pile materials, and that had to do with, I think, the composite piles as
Yes.
one alternative.
Specifically, yeah.
Yeah. You wanted to use the treated, and as the one downside you noted is a leaching of chemical. What is it treated with? Is it with,
It's a common preservative treatment. It's called CCA,
which is
copper chromium arsenate.
arsenic, yeah?
Arsenate.
Arsenate.
Arsenate, it's an arsenic product or derivative.
So
can
my
look into
thing
that.
here is the disadvantages to all the other alternatives were mostly just that they cost more,
Yeah.
whereas the CCA treated is the only one listed that has the potential for long-term like chemical leaching into the water,
Yeah.
and I'm not thrilled with that.
I want to point out there are other issues associated with other piles. I think you need to consider strength, and if you went FRP route, the highest strengths are with concrete fill. Placing concrete in water has its own implications that you would need to control for. There's also the consideration for strength, increased pile diameters, increased pile impacts, which would be needed to resist equivalent loads.
I mean, all the alternatives say they have excellent strength properties.
I mean, I know
Strength and
you list these,
drivability
but there's
issues.
no, I mean, you put these down as advantages, disadvantages, but there's no numbers attached to them, or like saying, are you saying a composite pile wouldn't work with your project?
No, it's technically feasible. We don't feel like it's appropriate. And
Is it
There
about the
are-
money? Is it about the cost?
it is an increased cost.
It's the money thing then,
That's a significant component.
all right? Versus leaching of a chemical.
Also, just to clarify, what handling and disposal BMP is required? What's that mean?
If
It's controlled.
it's a controlled waste.
Okay.
So if, 30, 40 years in the future, wants to replace the piles or get rid of the pier, it would have to be done in a controlled manner.
And the other was the tropical hardwood, which you said naturally rot and decay resistant, no chemical treatment required, excellent strength, about the same longevity as the treated, right?
Roughly.
What's that?
I said roughly, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are consistency implications, but for the most part, yeah.
Like, are there not consistency problems with the CCA treated as well? Or with anything?
It's less of an issue there. There's more
There's
availability.
always a risk of failure.
What is the most common?
CCA.
Yeah, well,
Is that true? Because we saw a lot of piers rotting.
The whole project already. I'm just looking at, I don't want this to cost more than my house,
Yeah.
which is getting pretty close to it, Rich.
you need to identify yourself.
I'm sorry, Rich Osborne, 48 Riverside Street.
Hi, Rich. Yeah,
So,
we went out.
I see what you're saying, and I see everybody else's docs on water having the same.
I know, but then we get into, oh, that's the way it was, everyone was using chemically treated lumber,
Right.
and therefore we should keep doing that, even with the new projects. Well, what's the cost of the tropical hardwood, which is not treated? That's not as much as that's not as much as the composite, right?
I can provide significantly more information about that, but you have availability issues to consider, but direct costs per linear foot, it's on the order of $10 additional per linear
Per
foot
foot.
pile.
Per pile.
Per pile. And I think it's
How many
unreasonable
piles?
to be held to a different standard when we feel very strongly that we're conforming with the regulations and the spirit of the Wetlands Protection Act with this design.
I know, but in fairness, well, you did say you'd use the helix. Your response to every comment was, well, we really should need to do it that way because...
The comments weren't provided in writing, and I tried my very best
I know you did. You
to
did-
summarize.
You
and
did
I
a good job.
I believe the comment was to provide additional information and consider. And
Yeah.
I think we've done exactly
We're
that.
very thorough. This is a
Yeah.
good breakdown.
I don't know what the board feels about it. Peter?
My feeling is that we shouldn't be pushing them to a much higher standard.
We should or we shouldn't?
No. When I see the docks down in that river and the state of some of those, I mean, this is a good project.
Some of them might predate.
Yeah,
A
well,
lot of
yeah.
these regulations, yeah.
But even some of those that we've approved since I've been on the board, we
Right.
have not been as stringent as we're getting to right here.
we're getting what?
We haven't been as strict. The Mead one last summer, there's one
Well, I know
on Doty
that.
Ave across the way. I think, this is a good project, the way they've laid it out. So we continue? Want to go on to 5?
Well, I mean, I don't know what so you're in favor of the chemically treated piles, is that it?
It says right here, the Environmental Protection Agency has allowed continued use of the ZGA treatment for marine use.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say I'm in favor, but I can live with it.
We can
Right.
live. All right,
Gotta
well, let's
stick with
move
my
on.
craw, but, I mean,
That was,
That was
the spacing, wasn't that your issue?
Well, yeah, I was just, so 5 and 6 both have to do with the salt marsh. Comment 5 specifically about trying to increase the span over the salt marsh so there's no piles. And then I think 6 was the height of the pier over the salt marsh.
And the ratios?
Yes.
That's all the height. The height, that's all. the
Yeah.
ratio incorporates the height.
So I guess going through the 2, starting with 5, this is, the proposal or the request to consider increasing the span at the beginning of the pier so there's no piles in the salt marsh. There is, we asked them to look at 15 Mead Street, and I think it is a valid difference that there's a seawall at 15 Mead Street, so they already have elevation, whereas there's not really any existing elevation of this lot over, or anything significant, really. Because that's what that long span was resting on, was like the seawall. And they don't have that here, so then they have to build something to rest it on, which I think is fairly valid.
So you're rethinking it?
Well, we asked them to look at it,
Yeah.
and they did. And
And that was 5.
it's not that I am thrilled with the ideas of piles being in the salt marsh, but I'm not sure I see really a way around it.
If we could, we would have.
Yeah,
If we could, we would have.
all right. On number 6, so number 5, I think Vanessa had raised that issue to get it out of the salt marsh, but it's not really feasible. And one of the issues you pointed out was there's no seawall to anchor to, right?
Yeah, we're still on 5? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But on to 6, consider increasing the height of the pier to provide a minimum of 1.5 to 1. And where are you with it now?
Standard's 1-to-1, isn't it?
This was something that George,
Go
sorry,
ahead.
go ahead.
Well, our perspective is it's not a standard, but it's general practice. And we are willing to accept the change in tide on
To-
1.5 to 1.
You are? Thank you.
That's the one I feel more strongly about,
Yeah.
because Georgia followed up with DMF, the reviewer, and I actually read that paper.
Yeah,
Or-
me too.
I wouldn't say the entire thing, but, the beginning and the end. And from reading that, I did start feeling pretty strongly about the 1.5
Yeah.
to 1.
It is fairly recent, though, so
Yeah.
there may
Yeah.
be pushback.
And,
Well, I like that you're going along with that.
I thought that it was like a pretty well thought out experiment that they did, and
Yeah, although they had plenty of existing piers they could have used in that experiment, rather than destroy salt marsh.
Okay.
Okay.
Just to clarify, with the exception of the issue with, you're okay with going with the helix on comment, in response to comment 3?
Yeah, it should,
And you're-
it should be conditional, though. We're
I
gonna
was gonna say, okay with attempting.
Yeah, yeah,
to do
oh,
it.
yeah,
put good faith
of course.
effort into that.
And on number 6, you're okay with the 1.5 to 1 height width ratio?
Yep, I'm gonna
Okay.
give you 6 feet.
So, well, that's all I have right now for,
Okay,
Yep,
you all set, Vanessa?
yep.
Chelsea?
Yeah.
Anyone in the audience have any comments, questions?
How does the 1.5 to 1 change
I have one question. Why don't you have a...
can you stand up and identify yourself? Stand up and identify yourself, please.
Ken Wally, 152 Elliott Street in Danvers. Why don't you have a standard that everybody has to do, so they don't have to come up here and make all these changes? Just have a standard plan.
Well, like he said, some have had, for example, one has seawalls that might change what they do versus what they're doing. They want,
The standard with this option, the standard with that option.
Well, some of
they
these
wouldn't
things
need
you
us, we just,
There's a lot of
isn't that simple?
Yeah.
If I could, it's complex. Every site's different, so I think the goal is really to look at each situation individually and minimize those adverse impacts, thinking about all the users of the site, the environment, and of course, the applicable standards.
Oftentimes, we do have standards, and then applicants want to either
Get a
have a
waiver.
waiver from a certain standard, whether it's no build, no disturb, or working within an area, or, and then we have to make judgments on that. So,
One other question, Alex.
we're gonna
If you-
continue on.
If you go to the 1.5 to 1 ratio of the height,
Yes.
what does that do to the length of the pier, or do you have to build steps out of the yard, or?
Okay, there'll
be some
they're
plan
in this discussion,
Yeah.
but to cover them here, there are implications with any change, of course. So essentially, we're gonna need to add 2 steps
Yeah.
to get the height, the minimum necessary. And we're gonna have to look at this a little bit more, but there may be, we may need a little bit of additional length in the gangway for that tidal range. But essentially, the horizontal location of the float and the end of the pier aren't changing.
All right.
And whatever additional length that may add, you're still not going anywhere near the channel, correct?
It may not add anything.
Well, that's
I
not
don't
our
think it's gonna add
jurisdiction.
any.
That's Chapter 91 in the
Right.
Harbor Master anyways.
All right,
Are we all set? Everybody comfortable?
He's gonna
All
come
right.
back with a revised plan.
What's that?
Are
Do
you,
we-
is he intending on coming back with a plan showing that new 1.5 to 1?
Yeah, we will
Yeah.
provide that. We're requesting, we'd like to close the hearing if we could, and
Yeah.
make that as a condition.
you want to have a vote today?
You just,
Okay, so
Depends on the
that should be one of the conditions. Do you want to make the motion?
Yeah, well, yeah, they submits a revised plan, yeah.
Right, so that's.
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we issue an order of
All
conditions
these conditions here.
on the notice of intent for 48 Riverside
Excuse me,
Street.
Mike, 1 second. Mike?
I think there should be a safeguard of some sort. So if the commission approves it tonight under the stipulation that a revised plan shows
Yeah,
1.5 to 1, I mean, if, that's a general sense. We don't know exactly how much the pier is extending out. We don't know exactly the size. So if there is,
I got a feeling it is.
I think there should be a safeguard in that statement, just saying that if the impact is greater than what was expected, the applicant needs to return to
He has
discuss.
the right to come back.
I agree with you. It's going to be conditional.
Yeah.
I'll start over. I'll make a motion to issue an order of conditions for 48 Riverside Street, DEP file number 14-1337, on the applicant's notice of intent regarding the Perry's building, that we approve the plan, which is as a condition will be revised to show the change on comment number 6 to a 1.5 to 1 ratio, that it also, the applicant agrees to use a helix installation in connection with the, is it the proper term, the mooring or the anchoring? Yeah. And the applicant would come back if for some reason the 1.5 to 1 requires some additional changes in the length of the pier, correct?
Okay,
That's the-
there's a couple other
And
conditions.
agrees to file a revised plan.
I'm going to add some more conditions as part of it.
Wait a minute, it's my motion.
All right, well, go ahead. I was trying to get your attention, but you kept reading away. We'll just go right down these, and there's one other, the 18-inch.
Oh, yeah. Well,
Load height.
are these standard, or do we add are these specific to this project?
The 18, we always have you call out for peer projects, but
Yeah,
if the
yeah, all
18
right.
is the number that's to change.
All right. In addition to what's previously been stated in my motion, the following special conditions: floats must be placed off-site or upland during winter storage months. The method and timing of construction must be during any regulatory condition as specified by the Army Corps of Engineers. The applicant shall utilize best management practices outlined in Mass DEP's Guide to Permitting Small Pier Support Docks and Piers, and Division of Marine Fisheries environmental recommendations for small docks and floats. Those are the two publications we looked at. Yeah. He knows those. To the greatest extent possible. We've already pretty much discussed that. Work must take place from a floating platform, such as a barge, where possible. The builder shall work from completed sections of the pier. The use of jetting for pile installation is prohibited. All piles shall be installed by driving so as to avoid disturbance to surrounding vegetation and bottom sediment. And I already mentioned the revised plan. I guess we've backed off the 24-inch. I didn't hear anything else on that. I had suggested 24. What was your response on that?
That we feel like we have made the best effort to get it to a reasonable height. We'd prefer no height, realistically, for ease of access. But we understand that this is a critical environment, and we're trying to put our best foot forward to raise the bar and improve the situation. But we feel 18 inches was what we envisioned. That's what we came with, willing to give, and we think that it's reasonable.
All right, so I would include a final special condition that the float height be a minimum of 18 inches. And I just want to point out that that's not going to preclude us in the future from revisiting this.
With future docks?
Yeah, I mean, but that's the motion.
How many copies, hard copies, full size, of the revised plan? You want to talk to you?
Yeah, I'll call you tomorrow.
Can I have that memo back, please? Sorry about that.
Motion's been,
Okay,
sorry. I keep forgetting I'm not chairing.
the motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Good luck.
Thank you very much.
Good luck, sir.
Just a quick question. What's your timing? You have to go for Chapter 91 next?
They're in draft form, Chapter 91 and core ordinance.
When do you think you'll be doing this project?
So this has to
We
be,
have a few bake sales.
construction has to be done in the wintertime, right?
Yes, yeah,
So probably next winter at the earliest.
and whatever time of year restrictions we might have.
Okay, good luck.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Item D, notice of intent for 50 Prince Street, DEP file number 14-13, and they do not have a DEP file number yet. Who's here to represent the applicant?
How are you? I'm Bill Kenny from Riverhawk Environmental.
Did they get one? Oh, yeah. They did.
What's that?
1339.
Oh, you do have a DEP file number?
Did get one
Came
today
in
from the
today.
DEP, yeah.
Okay, good.
What is it?
14-1339. It's on the agenda.
got lost in the electronic system, I
that
think.
what-
I think so.
Okay, go ahead.
So we have a fairly straightforward project at Merrimack Valley Distributing. We're doing a project to install a emergency drainage shutoff valve in the lower portion of the parking lot, or adjacent to the parking lot, as well as revise the grading in the back of the parking lot to accommodate the longer trailers that they're using now. So that's kind of just an overview of the property. Almost the entire project is within the 200-foot buffer of Crane Brook, so that's why we're here, as well as...
Where is Crane Brook on the map?
It's back here. It shows up a little bit better on the other side. I've some figures on the other side. It's on the other side of a fence, chain link fence with barbed wire actually on the top. And all of the work is within areas that have been previously disturbed but are now manicured and upkept, either pavement or grass.
That's the two.
So the drainage shutoff valve, the purpose for that is in case they had a release from one of the trucks or their fueling system, we wanted to provide them with provisions to be able to shut the drainage off so it doesn't end up in the brook. So that came up during a recent report or investigation that we conducted for them, the SPCC plan, a spill prevention, control, and countermeasure plan. So that was one of our recommendations as a contingency if there was a release. When we were there looking at the area that we proposed this shutoff valve, we noticed that the slope behind where they park some trailers, the trailers that most roadway or distributors and other companies use are a little bit longer than they have historically been, and creates issues because the concrete pad for the landing gear is in a different spot now, and the trailers are a little bit longer. So we proposed just slightly lessening the grade of this slope that's behind the parking area, so that the back of the trailers don't come into the slope, as well as providing a granite curb at the edge of the existing parking. So there'd be no addition of any impervious area. And in fact, there will be removal of material from within the flood zone. So there's no compensatory storage requirements or anything. It's basically more stormwater storage, if anything, would be available.
So what is there, a drain there where's it drain? It drains out to the river?
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you and that sounds like if you had like a gasoline spill or an oil spill,
Yeah,
it would
more
end
like
up in the
diesels.
river?
Yeah.
So where would it go, assuming you shut the emergency off? What would happen then?
There's sort of a low area. This area here along the edge where the landscape is a berm, waist high or so.
Yeah.
And there's tens of thousands of gallons of liquid storage in that area, in that low-lying area, which would slow the flow down and allow for collection,
Clean up.
environmental collection, exactly.
Yeah.
So the concrete pad, is that basically where like the engines are supposed to be parked over?
So
What is the
there are
point
no
of that?
trucks that really park here. This is trailer storage.
Okay.
So the revised concrete pad is actually just to provide room for the landing gear to come down. I don't know when the DOT revised the regulations, but maybe a decade ago or so, they revised the length of the trailers that were permissible on the roads from 48 to 53 feet. And it messed up every facility that did distributing work, and they've had to repair where their landing or the concrete pad for the landing gear will be. And that needs to be concrete because if it were pavement, on hot days, the landing gear would go right through it and create an issue with asphalt pavement.
So where you're putting in more concrete, you're just taking out pavement, so it's.
Exactly, yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Now, this valve that you want to install, is this automatic, or does someone have to
No,
go manually
It's
close it?
manual, yes, exactly. So it's a knife valve. So basically, it's coupled into the existing pipe, and it's a valve that plunges down and closes the conveyance. And it's really the easiest way for facilities like this to operate it in the event of an emergency. There are different worm valves and other stuff like that can be used, but this is...
Okay, so overall, I mean, this benefits the wetlands.
Sounds
Oh,
like an
definitely,
emergency.
yeah. Actually, the whole project does, this grading revision will be more stable in the long run and result in less erosion potential.
Okay, now, but this work is within the 25-foot,
Yep.
so you're going to require a waiver?
Yeah,
To
they're
work
asking
in.
for one.
If we need one, absolutely.
I would say yes, you would.
Yeah. All right.
So what exactly, so putting in the shut-off valve, what's the work that needs to take place to have that happen? Like,
Dig down to the pipe, install the valve, which is basically just an assembly that sort of couples into the existing PVC pipes, and then there's a road box that comes up to the surface
Okay.
and backfill and stabilize after.
okay, so that's taking place within the 25.
But it's all gonna be on area that's already been developed.
It's already developed, yep, manicured grass area, and then the pavement is pavement, so.
And then you need to do some work to shore up the berm or the,
It's just grass is what we're, loam and seed with the standard grass blend.
and that's not because anything's driving over it or anything like?
Currently, you can see this is the existing, this is the proposed. The existing slope comes up right at the edge of the pavement, and you can see, actually, this line is where the back of the trucks kind of come in and dunk into the slope now. We've recommended just sort of moving that slope back a little bit so that doesn't happen, and putting a granite curb along the existing impervious area, so not adding any additional impervious area with the granite slope, which will act as a wheel stop, or predictable wheel stop.
You can do that easy enough? Yeah.
Well, somebody else can, not me.
But somebody can.
I had a comment on the seed mix,
Sure.
and that Kentucky bluegrass is not, I wouldn't consider that a native grass for this area. And I'm fine with the red fescue and the perennial ryegrass, but the Kentucky bluegrass, I'd like to see more of like a native mix.
Okay.
Like, what do you like?
Well, you can just get these like
Yeah.
the standard like native.
Just buy a native mix?
grass mix.
Native wetland mix or
No.
native upland?
Upland,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
you can get a grass mix, but for native grasses, so
Sure.
the other two are fine, but
I don't know if that came from a DOT spec, potentially, that recipe.
oh,
But we can do whatever.
yeah, I'd
You
prefer
know.
to do
No
all
problem.
natives.
Sure.
Probably hardier anyways. Kentucky bluegrass is a difficult one.
Difficult to keep, yeah.
You can only have 12 of them at any given property. I'm just kidding.
Well,
Okay, anything else, Mike?
no,
Vanessa?
no, it sounds like something that needs to be done,
I think
you
it's
know, to
overall, it's an
prevent
improvement, yes.
chemicals going into the grain.
That's a big lot down there, too.
Yeah.
Vanessa, are you all set?
Yeah,
Chelsea?
I'm all set.
Anyone in the audience? Ma'am?
I just would like to ask the hours of construction.
Excuse me,
Oh, I'm sorry. Joanne Walsh, 141 Village Post Road. Just the hours of construction, because I know neighbors of mine have had a real issue with noise coming from that area.
excuse me, ma'am? Ma'am, could you just step to the microphone, please?
All right, so anyway, I just want to know the hours of construction, because I have neighbors who have complained about other noises coming from that area. So, and they've tried to alleviate that problem to some success, and that's all. I just want you to be aware that there's a residential area that abuts that.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'd say 8 o'clock to 5 o'clock. 8 o'clock.
That would be perfect.
And we can put that in.
Yeah, could we just make note of that, because...
Conditions.
Ma'am, did you have a question?
Martine Kellett, 15 Carriageway. I'm just curious, how long does it take to shut off the valve manually?
Very quick. You only have to open up the top or the manhole cover and press down the valve. And that's why we selected this type of valve, so that we didn't have to like twist any gears or anything like that. So it's almost instantaneous.
That's a good question,
Yeah.
because I hadn't thought of that, but, so you have to open up a manhole cover.
Yeah, and we'll put
Is
a
that
sign-
accessible to whoever's on duty?
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have to call somebody up
That's,
to...
no, yeah, for the site guys, and they're all trained on the use and operation of this, in accordance.
They
with
will be?
SBCC. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yep. It's part of the overarching federal regulation. If you have greater than 1,320 gallons of oil, bulk oil storage at any facility, you need, facilities need to have an SBCC plan in place in case there is.
So there'd be a procedure.
Yeah, there
Would
is,
that
yep.
have to be filed with us?
No,
No?
That's not our.
You store fuel there, or is that just fuel
they
that's in
do
the
store
trucks?
fuel, yes, yeah, for the trucks. And that regulation's really helpful because it leads to clearer minds being able to establish provisions for what to do if there is an emergency, and even better, put some prevention in place to prevent any kind of issues by training and engineering controls.
Okay.
Because sometimes the environmental cleanup guys or people can get there in the middle of the night and not know what's going on, what the lay of the land is, and have to search out where the contamination may go. So this plan's nice for that reason.
Okay, good. If we're all set, I'll entertain a motion to,
Right, well, I would do a motion on the waiver first.
yes.
So I make a motion that we grant a waiver from the 25-foot no disturb to allow for the 300 square foot disturbance in the 25-foot buffer, which is the installation of an emergency drainage shut-off valve. That's a motion on the waiver.
One second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So now I'll make a motion that we issue an order of conditions on the notice of intent for 50 Prince Street, DEP file number 14-1339, with a condition that all work be done between 8 o'clock and 5 o'clock, that appropriate steps be taken to prevent any intrusion into the river area, and anything else?
Yeah, to use a native grass
And,
seed
oh,
mix.
yes, thank you, Vanessa. And that a native grass be used, and that be noted on the plan.
Yep.
Is the erosion control part of the?
Normal erosion control, that's what I was,
Yes, yeah, and we have provisions for that here with
all right.
the perimeter erosion controls as well as inlet sediment
Okay.
filters.
So can you just make a change to the type of grass? He doesn't have to redo the plan, right? Or do they?
No, I think that was supplemental to the notice,
All right.
correct? Yeah.
All
So
right.
we'll know.
Okay,
the
so the
name.
motion has been made quite eloquently.
Well, thank you.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Good enough.
Okay, good luck with
Thank you.
that. Yeah. There used to be an airport near there, you know,
That's
Robin.
right, yeah.
Did you know that? Yeah.
Actually, I think it extended to where the condos are now.
Right,
The
right.
airport.
Yeah.
Parallel with Collins Street, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thanks.
Next, item E, notice of intent for 9 Tibbetts Avenue, DEP file number 14-13. Is there a DEP number for this, Georgia?
1.38.
38.
Mr. Chair, I know the applicant, he's actually a client of mine, so I'm going to step out on this. I wish him good luck, but I'm going to step off.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have
I prefer a long-time friend.
Pro bono?
No, all kinds of things. I did a couple of approved. Yeah, trade-offs. Good evening. Bill Manuel from Wetlands and Land Management. And we have two things we'd like to talk about for Mr. LeBlanc tonight. One of them is to repair his seawall, and the other is to replace and expand his current pier ramp and float. So this is 9 Tibbetts Avenue. The streets here, you can see the upland area is fairly limited. The house is right here. There is a seawall right along the waterfront that, and there's actually an access ramp here, but we have a seawall along the waterfront. It's a combination of concrete in some portions, timber with some dolphin piles around this area, sort of timber reinforced wall here. But all in all, from side to side, it's generally in very poor condition. The concrete in this corner here, it's severely undermined. It's most likely going to take a season or two before that wants to topple over. That you can see if you go out there, the timbers in this area are severely rotted, and the whole thing needs to be repaired. The difficult part about this is very limited areas of work and very limited access. The house takes up pretty much the width of the site, and there's not much room between the existing porch and the seawall here. And so what we're thinking is the best way to repair this wall, rather than try to tear it out and rebuild it, is to just drive sheet pile in front of it and then backfill any voids with gravel or concrete. And that would be done from a barge from the water side. So the wall is nearly vertical. All we need to do is begin driving the sections of sheet pile. They come in about 18-inch widths, and they're kind of slotted, and you drive one in to the appropriate depth or refusal, and then you begin driving the next one. You kind of hook the one groove into the next and drive that down and continue on in a series until you get to the end of the wall. And as I said, any voids in between the existing wall and the driven sheet pile will be filled with crushed stone or poured concrete. So at most, there's probably an expansion of the width of the sheet pile, 6 inches or so, out in front of the wall. But that is probably the most efficient way to repair this wall, because otherwise, when you see it, it would be a massive demolition right along the waterfront to tear out this concrete, put new footings in, rebuild that wall, all messing with the tides, working around the tides. So that is the proposal for the seawall. There is presently about a 30-foot, maybe not that long, but about a 15-foot pier, ramp, and then 2 floats, an 8x20 float and a 12x24 float. And right now, the pier and the ramp are in pretty poor shape. The floats rest directly on the bottom at low tide. What we would like to do is...
Excuse me 1 second, Bill.
Yes.
Thank you.
Proposal is to construct a 77-foot-long pier, 35-foot-long gangway, and then a series of floats extending out to a T-float. It would be 2 or 3 10x20 floats, a 10x10 float here, and then 2 T-floats on the end, 12x24. And that would get us out it would get us to permanent water at the end floats. It would basically bring us out just to the top of the break, the change in topography of the channel. So we're not in the channel, we're just on the very edge of it. We would use a series of driven piles for the pier as the vertical supports. Once you do that, basically you're constructing a long deck. The gangway is prefabricated. The floats are going to be secured by a series of driven piles, and they'll be sort of U-bolted around the piles so that they can go up and down with the tide, but they can't move up and down the river with the current. These floats out here will rest, the initial float and a half will rest on the bottom. The rest will be in permanent water. And you say, well, why are you doing that, Bill? I just heard another proposal where they were suspended over the mud flats. And the answer is because this is a different site. The substrate changes I'd say right about here. There is a, and I'll just circulate these photos, you can take a look at it. It is a mapped shellfish area, but the area is not harvested recreationally or commercially. Shellfish prefer a sandy, gravelly substrate. We have that condition. You can just go through these. We have that condition near shore, and the evidence is there. There's obviously soft-shell clams, mussels there. We see the holes in the sediment. We see the blowholes in the sediment. The substrate changes as you go further out, and it becomes a solid marine clay substrate, and the clams just aren't in that. There's a small veneer of mud that's drifted over, perhaps an inch or 2 or 3, but it's not enough for the clams to burrow in and survive. So it is a solid substrate. You'll see the pictures. Brian's dug some holes to illustrate what it's like. But that's why there's no point in trying to suspend these things with using stop collars or legs to keep it a certain distance above the flat. There's no point because it's not shellfish habitat. That's why I say each site has their own merits, and we have to look at each site and design accordingly. So that is the proposal. We think it's the best proposal on the seawall to just basically encapsulate the wreck that's there. And as far as the pier ramp and float, we do span over the important shellfish habitat. And where it's not important, where there is no shellfish habitat, it's going to be fairly conventional.
What's that?
Yes?
Could we get some independent verification on the habitat for the clams out farther where you're proposing having the floats sitting on the bottom?
Yeah, how would you like that site walk?
I'd like that too, but
Yeah. And we can have holes dug for you, and you'll see the difference. You'll be able to see where the blowholes stop, because the substrate stops, and you won't see any from here on out. So I think a site visit's very telling on this one.
Is that what this photo was illustrating?
That's the substrate. Yep.
Okay. And yeah, I can see that layer of mud, and then right underneath it is the clay.
It's just solid marine clay. DEP issued a file number. They had no comments on this. We did receive comments from Marine Fisheries. I think a lot of it was, well, the initial part of the comment letter was the standard. It is a map shellfish bed. They had questions about the work barge. Would it be taken off-site during low tides? And yes, it would be. They had comments about, certain amount of water underneath the floats. But those were all related to areas that were viable shellfish habitat. We're prepared to respond to Marine Fisheries, and but I think you'll see when you get out there that is a marked change in the substrate, and that's why we have this proposal here.
What is the reasoning behind so much float surface area?
A lot of toys. The owner has a lot of toys. They swim off the inner floats here.
How are you going to swim? How deep's the water at high tide?
At high tide, what, about 4 feet? 4 to 5 feet?
Yeah, that's medium tide, I'd say around 8 to 10 feet.
Excuse me, you are?
I'm Brian LeBlanc, the owner.
Thanks.
I just also wanted to say that my uncle and my great uncle lived there since 1942. He bought the house in 42 and I bought it in 98. And they used to carry me across the mud when I was 3. And then 4 or 5, I grew up there until I was probably 14. So there's a clear, in some of those pictures you can see where the blowholes for the clams stop. There's a line all the way across on the river. And then you can see where the clams.
He needs to go to the mic, he's not picking them up.
Okay. You said we can't hear you, so go to the microphone. Thanks.
He just had knee surgery.
Oh, we need to talk. That's in my near future.
My uncle bought the property in 1942, my great-uncle, Mike O'Brien. And my father and my uncles used to carry me across the mud when I was 3 in 1965. So from those years, from the 60s, early 70s, I used to dig the clams. So I know where all the clams are. I have a long, long history of over 50 years on that property. And there's a clear line where the clams end and the clay bed substrate begins. And we can prove that. And we do have some pictures of a couple of holes. There's 2 different holes there. One I dug at 86 feet, and the other one is probably another 24 feet beyond that at about 100 feet. So there are 2 floats that sit on the clams now. So the consolation is that those floats come off the clams, and then a float and a half. We're asking for about a float and a half that sits on the substrate, which is about a few inches of mud and nothing but clay.
I'm seeing 3.
Way out there on the mean low tide, okay? So at dead low tide, you may see that 1.5 floats will sit on that clay bed, okay? There is no shellfish out there. I can prove that. I could dig some more holes. Once you guys go down there, you can see the blowholes. You can see where it's totally smooth mud with no blowholes, and then you can see where the clams are. So the consolation is we will be taking off the 44 feet of float off of the clam beds that actually where they live, and there's going to be nothing but fishing pier there with a 35-foot ramp that comes down on top of the floats. And you asked what the reason is for, is that because, you know, you can't swim in the channel. Okay, I wouldn't want my family or my friends or myself swimming in that channel. It's a very, very strong tide. It's like as fast as you can walk, that's how fast that tide goes through. I swim out there for years. I swim all year long. I mean, not all year long, but every single year from like April to October, I swim in that water. And the reason for the floats is because of there's a couple of 15-foot floats for sea-doo, a rowboat, kayaks, and a motorboat. But for the reason for the floats is that I swim, you know, I prefer, you know, like 4 or 5 feet of water that I can stand up where the water's like here, and that's when I choose to swim. You know, tide changes every hour, every day. So when I have people over and want to go swimming, I usually plan it so there's only 4 or 5 feet of water there. And plus the fishing, I've caught and released several stripers over the years, catch and release, and that they're all caught within like 50 feet of shore, not out in the channel. You know, so we're going to fish and we're going to swim off these, you know, not every single day, but on occasion. I want the option to be able to do that, to be able to fish on the sides. And out in the channel, you really can't fish. There's boats going by all day long. You know, but that's the reason for having some floats there, you know, in case I want to go fishing or in case I want to go swimming. And it's so much easier to do that. You can't do that in the channel with a fast-moving tide going by. It's too dangerous for me or my friends and family. So I just as soon, you know, have a couple that I can do that at certain points of the tide, you know.
Brian reminded me, very important fact that I forgot to point out, is that these existing floats now that are resting on the bottom happen to be in the area, these 2 existing floats here, happen to be on the viable shellfish habitat, on the near shore sandy gravelly substrate. Those will be removed, obviously, and that is removing almost 450 square feet of float from the viable shellfish habitat. And what he was saying is a float and a half will rest on the bottom. And you say, well, I see 3 floats plus the 10 by 10. The mean low water line is here. From basically this half of the float, it's always going to be in water. So it's only this float and basically half of the second float that would bottom out at low tide.
Okay.
So that's a fairly significant trade-off.
One other question I have, and then I'll ask if anyone else, have you considered concrete blocks to replace this wall? And the
We
reason I
looked at-
ask is that the metal, whatever you call it, sheet piling, that's going to corrode over time, won't it?
We could use a vinyl product too. We're looking at vinyl or steel. But the reason why we did that is because we knew you would be concerned about marching the wall out more. If we do a block, we need to do excavation so that we have a solid base to put the block. We didn't want to be excavating in shellfish habitat. And what are the blocks? 24 inches wide at the base. That's going to bring that wall out 2 more feet. And we thought the best solution was to just drive sheet pile straight in.
I would like to say I was under the impression that these sheets were made out of fiberglass.
Fiberglass, vinyl, steel.
Yeah. So what we propose to do, what I was talking about with the engineer, Bob Griffin, is that we were going to do a light gray fiberglass corrugated that hook onto each other, and it's all mud and clay in this part of the river. So when the barge is like, banging them down through, there's actually, no major impact of, getting a backhoe and digging out this giant hole to put in the footing, pouring cement, or I understand the blocks and the pins. But the fiberglass corrugated wall that slips into each other gets banged down through the mud and the clay bed, and it's just the lowest impact possible of doing this project. Absolutely the lowest impact possible. And the fact that it's not made out of steel, it's fiberglass, and it's colored light gray, so it's kind of pleasant. It's not steel, rusty steel, but it's fiberglass. And it just goes all the way across and makes the 2 corners, the 2 jogs.
Fiberglass will withstand the pounding to get?
Yes, yes, it's heavy duty.
Big fiberglass piles.
It's colored light gray. It's not steel, and it's low impact. And we're asking for a float and a half to sit on the mud. That's nothing but clay out there. In return, I'll take the other floats off, and that'll all be, right off where the clams actually are. Those 2 floats will go. And then we're only asking for a float and a half, depending on the tide. Dead low, you might find a float and a half sitting on that clay out there on the substrate. But regular tides, most of that's going to be floating because the tide doesn't go all the way out every single day. It's only certain days out of the year that happens. So most of the time, all those floats are going to be floating.
Okay, I'll open it up to the other board members, and then I have one point I want to make at the end. Vanessa, you have any questions, concerns?
Yeah, so I didn't, considering that the comments from Marine Fisheries were dated yesterday, I didn't really get a chance to go through them much, but it's an awful lot of float area, so it's 1,400 square feet of floats, which is like a small house out there, basically. It's an awful lot of floats. I'm a little concerned about the amount of square footage going on out there. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, basically 7 different parts going on out there. It's quite a lot.
And the current is strong, and the smaller floats are less safe. When you get a narrow float, a strong current, it's going to be tippy. And that's why we want the beefier float here.
Well, I'm not necessarily suggesting that each individual float should be smaller, but rather that there should be fewer of them.
What we're trying to accomplish is that we get out to where the permanent water is. And so we think this is the best solution. It's always, it's a economical balance, an environmental balance, a site balance, and we think this is a pretty good solution to get out past the viable clam flats and have something. These will be seasonal, so 6 months out of the year, they're not gonna be there.
Do you have it marked where there's kind of the transition zone between where you observed shellfish and where?
It's about the end of the pier, wouldn't you say, Brian? About
Yeah,
70
yeah.
feet offshore?
Yes. I also want to add that it's a very strong moving current, okay? The only time that current slows down is at high tide. I've lived there for 22 years, and I have 50 years of experience of swimming there since I was a little kid. The current's very strong. I wouldn't even go near that channel or let any of my friends go near that channel. They always have to stay in, because that's how fast you hit that channel, boom, you're gone. Either going that way on the incoming tide or you're going that way on the outgoing tide. That tide is very fast. So my neighbor, Mickey, 17 Tibbetts Avenue, he has an 8-foot wide float, and when I walk on his float to go out to his 12 by 24, he has a picnic table and an awning out there. When I walk on that 8, it's like this. Okay, that's why I didn't want 8, so that's why I went 10. I'm only asking for 2 more feet, because at 10 feet, now you have a lot less of tippy. But because of the current's always pushing that way or pushing that way, especially how far we're out here with the 77-foot and 35 feet of ramp, we're already 100 feet out there. That's almost to the channel. 8-foot wide is very tippy. And then his float out there, it's 12 by 24, and that's like this all the time when the tide is coming in and when it's going out. High tide doesn't move much at all. But when tide's coming in for about 4 hours, and when tide's going out for about 4 hours, it's 6 hours, twice a day. That rush of the tide is like walking as fast as you possibly can. That's the speed of the water. And I would rather stay with my friends and myself just another 40 feet in, you know, where there is no current or barely any much of one. You know, the current is past a certain point, like 100 feet, you know, that's where the current can grab you. So the reason that I, want 10 feet wide is one, the tipsy-turvy, people walking off, falling off the side of the pier. I think 8 feet certainly isn't wide enough. I think 10 feet is kind of like the safe zone. And as far as the 212 by, the 2 big floats out there, that is a fast-moving tide, nonstop, only except for high tide is that tide slow down or dead low. It slows down. The other 4 hours in and 4 hours out, twice a day, that's 16 hours. That's a fast-moving tide, in and out, in and out. So if you were standing out there, and when I stand on his float, which is 12 feet wide, it's like this, So that's the reason. Plus, I wanted to buy a 32-foot boat, too. So that's another reason for that, besides the rowboat and a couple of kayaks. The 4 by 15-foot little side things that people can walk on, that makes it easier for them to get in their kayaks. They can get in the corner and put their elbows both on the floats, So it's just safer and easier and less tipsy-turvy on those floats. That's the whole reason behind a lot of this, and the fact that, you want to get in your kayak, and I wouldn't want to get in a kayak in that channel for about, 4 hours in, 4 hours out, that part of the tide. Once the tide comes in, it's high tide, there's not much of a current. And then when it starts to leave for the first hour or so, it's not much of a current. But then when it gets past 2 hours in or it's like you're walking as fast as you can walk. That's how fast that current is.
You mentioned that these floats are seasonal. Where are they going to be stored off-season?
They'll be taken off-site.
Yep. Danvers Port Yacht Club.
I think we're going to make that part of a condition, too. We've seen others where they say they're just going to take them out, and they're sitting on the mud.
If you leave them out, if you leave them in, and that river has frozen over solid 3 times in the past 10 years, I've seen Kathy DiLorenzo. That's another point I wanted to make. Her pier is pretty much the same size as what I'm asking for, and she's 2 doors down. But she left her floats in a couple of different times, and they all got destroyed. So I have no plan on leaving the floats in and getting destroyed.
Well, I think we're pushing up against our time limits here, so I think what we want to do is get out and see the site. Is that agreeable?
Yeah. Let's get on the site.
And you recommend it low tide?
Definitely.
Doesn't even have a tide app.
Can we ask why, Bill, as opposed to?
I'd like to
So
see
you can see the
mid-tide.
sub-
I'd like to see this current that the gentleman has
Okay, but it's
mentioned.
important that you see the substrate
Well,
difference, unless that's not an issue for
That's
you.
point number 2. Does anyone have a tide table? And when are people available? I mean, you ladies, you're both pretty much out of town during the day, right, during the week?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it'd have to be a weekend.
Yeah.
What's the low tide for Saturday? Are you available Saturday?
Depends on the time.
Depends on the time. I've got
Okay, well,
one
the next question
appointment.
is when is low tide?
Trying, not much signal in here.
I'm gonna print out a tide chart too.
Trying to get a tide app, and it's all like ocean sounds for sleeping.
All right, hold on, I'm getting there. Okay,
We have 3 weeks till our next
Saturday
meeting, right?
is the 25th. Low tide. Perfect, 5:11 a.m.
Works for me, but
It's different in the,
Saturday.
it's different in the afternoon.
still works for me.
So, following Saturday, it would be about 10:30 a.m., Friday
It's
the
2 Saturdays, I'm out
31st.
of town, so I'm not available. I could do it
Okay.
on the Sunday, but not the Saturday.
So,
So what's the afternoon tide on Saturday?
that'll be 5 p.m.-ish.
It's
Roughly.
too dark.
Sunset.
But I think it's Saturday afternoon, it's supposed to be, the weather's supposed to be bad, right?
All right, what about, does Sunday though work, the 26th? Work at
Yeah.
all?
It'd be 6 a.m.
Oh, God.
We don't have to be there right at low tide, too, if we're there at 8.
8's gonna be too
You
low.
won't see anything then. It'll be halfway back, because it's really level,
What about
not
Sunday
much
the
of a
2nd?
grade out there, and the water
Sunday the 2nd.
does like,
Bill, how about Sunday the 2nd? Saturday, yeah, it's Saturday the 2nd.
That's a different
Sunday the
one.
2nd.
Let's see.
That would have to be in the morning.
So that's gonna be about 11-ish.
That'd be perfect.
February.
February 2nd, 11 a.m. is low tide.
It would be 11 a.m., yep.
Is that for you, Vanessa?
Yeah.
Does that work for
Yeah.
Vanessa and Chelsea?
You said February 2nd, 11?
Yeah.
Yeah, that works for me.
Okay.
February 2nd. Okay. So we want to continue this to,
Yeah, our next meeting is
Which is-
3 weeks.
what's the date on that?
The 13th, February 13th.
Okay.
And the other point is, I'd like an independent peer review of just the suitability for clams out there.
Or ask the,
Can we make that decision once you see the site? I think it's going to be pretty self-evident.
I'm gonna reserve judgment on that. We'll see it, and then we'll decide after that.
Yeah,
How's that? Is that a fair compromise?
that's what I'd
Okay.
like you to do.
Okay, so, That being said, we'll be there on February the 2nd at 11 a.m. for a site visit. And I would entertain a motion to continue this hearing to our next meeting on February the 13th.
I'll make a motion to continue the hearing for, I'm sorry, what is it? Did we get a number? We have a number.
Yeah, it's 3/8 of the last 2
Okay,
digits.
for 9 Tibbetts Avenue, DEP file number 14-1338, to our next meeting on February 13th.
Motion's been made.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we'll see you then.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Mike, come on back. All right, so next up is an abbreviated notice of resource area delineation for 83 Andover Street, 69 Collins Street, and 73 Collins Street. Who's here to represent the applicant?
Maria Furstenberg from TRC.
Do you mind speaking up? I
I
can't
was
hear
just
you.
gonna ask. Maria Furstenberg from TRC. Where do you want this?
Yeah, we can just.
So this is an abbreviated notice of resource area delineation. We went out and delineated the wetland resources at the site back in September, beginning of September, using the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers delineation manual and the Massachusetts BVW delineation manuals. And essentially, we identified 4 wetlands and 2 streams. One is intermittent and one is the perennial stream, Clinton Brook, which
Excuse me, just one
runs
second.
this way.
If any of the audience wants to move up front so they can see.
You're gonna.
Excuse me?
Mildred Gibson, Bow Street, we can't hear her at all.
Okay.
We'd like her to
Come on. Would you all like to move up a little closer to the front?
I'd like to be very clear, this isn't actually a project proposal right now. This is actually just talking about, did we delineate the wetlands and figure out where they really are? That's what we're talking to the commission about.
All right, just to clear things up a little bit from our end, too. This is my first experience with the
Okay.
the NRAD application, instead of just dealing with the regular wetlands delineation. So we're just asking you to be patient with us as we learn as we go.
Can I make a suggestion?
Go ahead, Mike.
Could staff just talk about what an ANRAD is, because I don't think these people know what's going on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
And what it stands
I'll have you
for.
chime in as well for
Sure,
site
but
specific.
you can
but
go first.
The ANRAD, that stands for Abbreviated Notice of Resource Area Delineation. So the application that was filed with the Conservation Commission and the Department of Environmental Protection, that ANRAD is a specific permit application that they have filed. And what that application is essentially asking this local Conservation Commission, this applicant has gone to their site, what they're proposing, those 3 addresses, and they have delineated, or basically gone out on the site and put flags in the ground and said, this is where the wetland is, or this is where they have determined the wetland is. So what she is going to do tonight is present how they delineated that wetland, how they flagged it, how they determined where the wetland ends and where upland is. And the commission will hear that opinion from her. And then what the ultimate decision would be is the commission either confirms or denies that line. So right now, we're not aware of any project that is to happen at that site. There's no construction-specific questions or projects that she's asking for. Right now, this is a discussion, and what she's requesting is the commission to review the wetland resource area that's existing on site. And if you do have questions, the chair will open it up after the presentation.
Yeah, so just to add on to that a little bit, the permit that we get issued is a confirmation of saying, yes, this is where the lines are, and those lines are then set for 3 years from the date of issuance. So it means that if the property owner wanted to do something within those 3 years, that when they came back to the commission, if they needed to, that we wouldn't talk about where the wetlands are because we would have already agreed about where they are. So it can, in a sense, streamline later project permitting because, you don't have revisions based on someone deciding that, well, we missed a spot. So that's the purpose of this, is to just essentially try to make sure that we found everything that we were supposed to find. So in September, we spent a couple of days out here on these parcels delineating the wetlands, and what that means is that we looked at vegetation and soil and hydrology indicators based on the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers delineation manual and based on the Massachusetts Bordering Vegetated Wetlands delineation manuals, and we complied with the criteria in those manuals to say, this is wetland, this isn't. Let's put a flag right here. So we've identified 4 wetlands. One of them is actually off-site. It's over here. There's a very large wetland here. And then there's another wetland here and one here. In addition to the wetlands that we identified, there's an intermittent stream that runs from this wetland and is a tributary to Crane Brook, which is the other stream that we delineated. So what we delineated for Crane Brook is actually the mean annual high water line, so that we could set riverfront area, which under the Wetlands Protection Act is 200 feet horizontally from the mean annual high water line.
Could you point out the roads on the...
Yes, so this is Collins Street over here. This is Andover Street. And this is an existing gravel road that runs off of Andover. And this is the existing condo association complex that's next door. And where is it? Right here? I think approximately like this, there's a National Grid right-of-way that's also adjacent to the site.
Are there any other structures out here?
No.
That's it? Okay. May I ask something? No.
Yes, Mike, go ahead.
Yeah. Has there ever been a previous delineation here that you're aware of?
I am aware of one. My understanding is that it's about 10 or so years old.
It's the same area, the same
It's
complete?
very similar. We actually found more wetland than the previous delineation did.
You did?
Yes. Our deviations, we found additional wetland in this area and in this area, and both are very transitional from a soils and vegetation perspective, so I can see why maybe someone else thought they weren't, but
You think it was a change over time? Or?
yeah, we do think that it's just changing that way.
And your firm did the delineation?
Yes.
There's not a lot more to know until we go out on
Right.
wetlands.
I think two things. It's a big parcel. I don't know if the site visit is going to show us a lot without
Well, it's
spending a lot
about
of time.
5 linear feet, it's over 5,000 feet, isn't it?
Yes.
So it's almost, it's over a mile, it's a mile of delineation. It's a lot.
It is a lot. It's about 20 acres in total.
Yeah.
And some of it's easier to walk through than others. I mean, this area certainly, because of the gravel road, is really easy to get to. This area is pretty grown in, so it's much more difficult to walk around that
You were
area.
able to get in there, though?
Yep.
All right, so as part of this motion, are we being asked to accept their delineation?
Not yet.
What do you mean? Well, so we
mean,
don't have a
what-
file number
what-
yet, so you
They don't have a
can't do
file
anything
number, we
tonight
can't do
anyway.
anything.
But as part of this hearing, what decision are you asking us to make?
We're asking you to confirm that you
Yeah.
agree with these lines. And it's a little difficult to see on here, but we also have bordering land subject to flooding here in the form of a 100-year FEMA flood zone. Sorry, forgot to mention.
Okay, and would you be agreeable to us hiring an independent firm to just verify your delineation?
We would appreciate being able to go on site with them, just so that if there are questions, it's much more streamlined and efficient, if they can say, you know, I think this should really be over here, you know, what did you see that made you want to put it here? It just makes it easier.
Okay, yeah, I don't think that's not unreasonable. And do we have someone that we can hire to do
So
it?
there is a technical process when the commission chooses to hire consultant funds, so I've written out a quick motion. But in addressing that, you and I would work together to draft a small scope of services about what we would be asking the consultant to do, which is basically review that delineation that we've been
Well,
providing.
they'd come out, they wouldn't just look at the map, they'd
No,
come
they
out
would
on
go out.
site.
Would they-
Would they go out
And that's
with us?
also what
Yeah,
the commission right now can discuss what they would like that, what the consultant can do,
yeah.
if they would like to do that now, and also that Peter and I can discuss exactly what goes in the scope for the consultant. And
Okay.
that has to be done in 10 days.
And
so
that, just to be clear, the applicant pays for this, right?
Yes, this is at the expense of the applicant.
What has to be done in 10 days?
Peter and I have to work on finalizing a scope of
Okay.
what the hire consultant would do.
Once we
Okay.
agree to do that.
Okay.
If you guys vote on that tonight
Yeah.
to hire consultant, the 10 days would start.
Without a number, we can still vote on that today?
Yeah, you only
What
need
do
a
you want?
number in order
To
to
issue.
issue
Yeah.
us
Right.
an
Well,
order.
Okay, do you have anything else to continue with before we open it to questions or discussion by the board?
Our only other request with respect to a peer review is, you know, there's a whole bunch of snow out there right now, so
Right.
obviously they can't go out now. We have had very up and down weather. We've had cases so far this winter where we've had no snow. So, you know, we understand we may end up waiting until the spring before this
Right.
can be confirmed.
That's fine. then.
But if,
'Cause I wanted to
if
snow.
conditions present themselves
Weather
before then,
reasons.
can the peer reviewer, you know, at their discretion say, we think this is, we can see what we need to see.
Right. It would be, you know, we would want people to work together, so that's not a problem. Okay, that being said, any other questions, Mike?
No, if it's appropriate now, I'd make a motion. No, do you want to open it
No,
up?
I just want to,
Yeah, I don't have any other questions.
Vanessa, do you?
No, no questions.
Chelsea?
Nope.
All right, all these people that are here tonight, I'm sure they have questions. Just let us know who you are.
Bob Walsh, 141 Village Post Road. I have a couple of questions. Number one, the total area, does it increase or decrease the wetland area? Where you delineated around, is there much of a change or?
Versus the previous delineation?
Yes.
Yeah.
She said slightly greater.
It increases it very slightly.
That's not exactly what you said, but go ahead.
Well, it increases it very slightly. I don't have an exact square footage for you. This little area was not previously considered wetland, and this tiny spot right here was not. Everything else that we've delineated as wetland was previously delineated as wetland, so it is not substantially different.
And now Ira is your client?
Yes.
All right. It's obvious that they have something in mind. I just want to.
Oh, yeah, of course.
That's fair.
You know, but I mean.
But it's not part of this application.
We were here last year. You weren't, but we were here last year because, you know, they were trying to do projects and it got passed. But I just don't want to see them encroaching on us anymore.
Sorry, just really quick, she can correct me if I'm not correct. To be clear, this entity is IRA Acquisition Corporation, which is not associated any longer with Group 1 Automotive, which owns the automotive dealership next door. So just to be clear, when the IRA, the actual IRA, the gentleman owned the site, he also owned this parcel. Group 1 did not buy this parcel. So they're two separate entities, just so everyone's clear if that needed to be clarified.
Okay, good. Thank you, Dave. Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'm not, Martine Kellett.
Martine, can you get close to that microphone in front of you, please?
Martine Kellett, 15 Carriageway. No, I didn't understand the gentleman. Can you repeat what the acquisition, what does IRA acquisition own?
So even though the current automotive dealership is known as IRA, there is a gentleman named IRA who owned the entire site proper. They have since sold Subaru, Toyota, everything on the much larger automotive site to Group 1 Automotive out of Texas. So they, in theory, don't own this, don't have anything to do with this parcel. They don't own it any longer. It's a separate company, just happens to be called IRA Acquisition Corp., which I agree is very confusing.
But that doesn't change the implication that there may be a project in mind down the road.
Yeah, I'm not even addressing that. I just wanted it to be clear, they're two separate entities. The site's right next door. I think we've had a lot of interactions with Group 1 lately, both between the Planning Board and Conservation Commission. So just so everyone's clear. I have no idea. We don't know what the potential project is. We don't know what IRA Holdings Corp. is doing, but...
And I have another question. Is anybody aware if there is any part of this wetland or not wetland is for sale? Or
I don't know.
You don't know. The wetland is owned by whom?
It's the parcel of land is owned by IRA Acquisition Corporation right now.
You mean the wetland?
The parcel. There are wetlands on the parcel.
Can you show which parcel is owned by IRA Acquisition? Ah.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
I'm sorry, I have another question. Since when?
I do not know that offhand. That's something that the assessor's office could tell you.
What's that?
Is William Russell?
Go ahead, sir. Could you step to the microphone, please?
William Russell, 81 Village Post Road. Could you point out again where Andover Street is?
All the way down here.
Just that short stretch?
Yep.
Where's the gravel road?
Right here.
So that's kind of around Dunkin' Donuts and that generally, right? Do you remember where Dunkin' Donuts was? Okay. Thank you.
Sir?
Donald Thompson, 107 Village Post Road. Committee members will probably remember me for my vociferous opposition to the IRA Subaru expansion, and you've answered most of my questions already so far. But it occurs to me, do we know, addressing the commission, do we know if any of the subject parcel is buildable?
We don't know at the moment.
That's what this process is for, is what I would say.
Okay. And just for the record, I'm very happy to hear that the commission is entertaining the notion of hiring an independent firm to double-check this. So thank you very much for your interest in that. I appreciate it very much.
You're welcome. Any other questions? All right, so we have two. Do we have to have a motion to study
Yeah.
this?
That's for to hire the consultant, to get that ball rolling, and then motion to continue the hearing.
Okay. Mike, could you make this motion?
Sure.
Just read it for later.
Yeah, that's fine. With regards to the ANRAD, Abbreviated Notice of Resource Area Delineation, public hearing for 83 Andover Street, 69 Collins Street, and 73 Collins Street, currently lacking a DEP file number, applicant IRA Acquisition Corporation. I make a motion for the chair to work with staff over the next 10 days to determine a scope of services and choose a consultant for peer review of the wetland delineation. That's the motion.
Motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, now we entertain a motion to continue.
the hearing.
If I may,
Do you have a preference?
well, I think we should continue at least a couple of hearings because it will
Sure.
take some time to,
Yes.
get the peer reviewer selected.
Yeah,
and
you're
then get
fine
out
with
to the
that?
site.
So should we leave it that we would reschedule at your impetus?
Alicia, how about a couple hearings out? How far
Yeah,
out is
I
that?
think a couple hearings out is fine, and if we're not ready, then we'll just let you know and ask for a continuance.
Why don't we postpone to right to the end of the winter? That way, the weather's not going to be a concern with getting the pier out there.
Do you want to do April 9?
April 9th or the end of March, one or the other?
Does she want to go out there?
If we could continue to a meeting in March, that would be preferable.
That's the end of
Just
winter.
in case.
12 through the 26th.
Well,
You have a preference on the second or fourth Thursday?
Okay, so we want to continue to March 12th, March 26th.
all right, make a motion that we continue the public hearing for the applicant Ira Acquisition for 83 Andover Street, 69 Collins and 73 Collins Street, ANRAD, till our next, well, not to our next date, to a hearing on March 26th, 2020.
Motion's been made. Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Okay, good.
What
Thank
if the work is not done by then?
Then we'll have to request a continuance.
They would know if there's another date, right? We'll let the...
They wouldn't get a
They're
separate
gonna have to
butter
check.
notification, but
Yeah.
I'm happy to take your email if anyone.
Summon a spokesperson for everyone
Right, and
to...
then we might have to discuss this between now and then, just to see if
Yeah.
the commission wants to be out there as part of the visit, the delineation.
You do that.
But I think we have to come up with the reviewer first,
Yes.
right?
Be out there for a while.
Okay, moving on. Minutes from December 12th, 2019, and January 9th, 2020.
We only have the January, right? Okay.
That's right, that's all. The minutes for January 9th. I had a chance to review them. Anyone else?
I did.
Chelsea?
I have a couple edits. Should I even say them now? Just.
I would say that just in case.
Yeah, I can do that. Yeah.
All right, so we're going to make a motion that we're just going to postpone approving the minutes until the edits are completed?
I mean, they're.
Motion to-
I thought some of you guys said you didn't look at them. Is that?
I did.
Oh, you did? Oh, everybody, oh, you did, okay. So I can, they're fairly minor.
So maybe approve the minutes.
Sure.
With Vanessa's edits.
Okay.
Okay.
Make that motion. I make a motion that we approve the minutes for January 9th, 2020,
With Vanessa's edits.
with edits, which edits will be submitted by Vanessa.
Okay, the motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, anything else? Anyone else have
Yes.
old business, something
I
else
just-
to discuss?
We missed an item on the beginning of the agenda. MACC conference is going to happen on February 29th. If members are interested in going, I know Mike loves the conference. They have great programs. They have buffets, but.
And we get reimbursed too, right?
And buffets.
Yes. So for new members.
And they have lots of progress.
Yeah.
It's really great. So if you
Workshops.
would like to go, please let me know as soon as possible so we
And
can get
if the
you
new
registered.
members are interested,
Yes, once we get them voted in.
well, they'll be voted in by then.
Yeah. I'll clue them in.
Okay, all right, whatever.
There's a conference out at
By the
Holy...
way,
Hold on, we're still on the,
10-foot.
hold on, Ken, we're still on the.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so we've made notice of the conference is available, and it sounds like most people will be interested in going. So,
gonna just, run
Georgia,
that
do you
one by
make
my-
reservations for that?
Yes.
When do you need to know by?
I would say, just to be liberal, end of mid next week.
Okay.
2 weeks.
Okay.
Maybe
Okay.
a little later, but
Yeah, why don't you just plan on 7? I mean, we can always just cancel 1 or 2 of them, right?
look at that.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Motion's been made.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
I have blood tests at 7 a.m. for my
No one
physical.
can leave yet.
What were you saying, sir?
That story about the 10-foot dock has to be 10 foot to be stable, absolutely not true.
Yeah.
I can make a 2-foot wide dock stable.
Okay.
It depends on what's on the bottom of it.
Yeah.
It's basic ship's construction.
Oh, okay.
Stop and say, like, are you planning on keeping
I appreciate that input.
I think he was mansplaining how a tide works, by the way.
Getting a lot of